Hello and welcome to another edition of Priority Message, the podcast and videocast from the Fire and Rescue Services Association. With me today, I have Ben Redwood, our national official and local official in Devon and Somerset. Hi, Ben.
Hi, Tristan. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. What would you like to talk about today? What content are we going to have in this episode?
It seems that the profile conversation at the moment is about cultures within the UK fire sector. There's been a number of events going on at Westminster, so I thought that should be the main subject of conversation, but also a quick roundup of some other news and what's been going on.
Okay, so we're recording this in April. But last month was quite a busy period. We'd been invited to give oral evidence at the Welsh Parliament, specifically with regards to the independent report into South Wales Fire and Rescue Service. It was an extremely lengthy, comprehensive document, the conclusion of which was that the organisation was institutionally racist and misogynist, and also took the unusual step of removing the fire authority and replacing it with a set of commissioners who now are the governance for that organisation. In addition to that, the then serving chief, Hugh Jakeway, retired. I think he was in the post for about 12 years, and an interim chief, Stuart Millington, has been put in post. And he previously was an assistant chief of North Wales, and I'm due to meet Mr. Millington later on this month to discuss what his plans are to turn the organisation around and how we can assist him.
Interesting times. They've obviously had a lot of challenges there that have brought to light some behavioural and cultural issues within that service.
Yeah, and it certainly is topical, and I think it needs to be topical because when matters are in the public eye, they tend to get actioned. When we gave evidence to the Welsh Parliament, it was not just us; it was also the FBU, and I think it was Unison as well, another union within the organisation. Which is available for anybody to see, and we'll put the link in the show notes. But I think one of the interesting things that came out of the FBU evidence was the regional representative claiming that if he was to design a fire service today, that he would use fewer on-call firefighters, which seems to have gone unnoticed. And I just would wonder what the on-call FBU members would feel about that comment, who are currently serving in South Wales Fire and Rescue.
And it's not a huge surprise that that's gone unnoticed and unchallenged, is it? Thinking back towards the end of last year, we had a chief fire officer going public saying that he felt the on-call system wasn't fit for purpose. And yet, in theory, the view from the NFCC is that the on-call element of the fire sector delivers excellent availability and value for money.
Well, we know it does, and it's good to hear people like Steve Healy come out with those comments that he genuinely and truly believes, as the on-call lead for the NFCC, that the future is on-call, but it does need some TLC. It needs some support and resources put into it, and we're more than happy to help him and his team do that. But it's a sad state of affairs when those sorts of statements do go unchallenged. And I just wonder whether, if you was to flip it and replace on-call with hold time, whether it would have also gone unnoticed. Can you imagine a trade union official saying that if he was redesigning the fire service today, he'd use fewer hold time?
I can't imagine that going unchallenged. No, I can't at all. And the on-call has undoubtedly been let down by a number of sectors within the fire sector for the last 10, 20 years. And in 20 years, the availability increase in payments for an on-call firefighter has gone up by 18 pence an hour in 20 years. which is a staggering demonstration of how far behind the fire service is in terms of supporting. And currently in the UK, the majority of appliances are crewed by on-call firefighters, and yet they have been completely let down and neglected at all levels within the fire sector, I would say. And this is yet a demonstration of that. And I think it's important for everyone to take an interest in the subject, because if the on-call fails and fire cover is replaced by whole-time fire cover, don't think, and I say this in my own service, we've got 70 odd on-call stations. If that failed, would there be 70 odd whole-time stations? No, of course there wouldn't. And you'd be seeing run times of 40, 45, 50 minutes, I would imagine. And this is a conversation that everyone needs to be having, in my view.
It does. I think it's endemic of the fire service. The fire service, by its nature, is reactionary, and the preventative, innovative, proactive measures that you would hope that any organisation would have are just not embedded within the fire service, and it's always playing catch up. And in terms of the culture, looking back at the evidence given at the Home Affairs Committee, which we'll come on to, I'm sure, the inspectorate was absolutely clear that the progress that's been made on culture has been far too slow, and in some cases non-existent. And it's exactly the same for dealing with the recruitment and retention of on-call. It's been far too slow, and in some services it is non-existent, and that is not acceptable.
No. And going back again to the reason why, at the end of the day, the fire service has an excellent standing within the public's viewpoint. If a firefighter knocks on the door and wants to come in and do home safety or as part of an incident, most people are more than happy for that to happen, and we can't afford to see that loss of confidence within the fire sector, which unfortunately some of these headline stories are going to contribute to.
Yeah, you're right. There is, and I know this isn't the subject you wanted to talk about, but it goes back to the argument about broadening the role and the possibilities that the fire service has in terms of what it can, the duties it can perform, how it can assist the NHS, etc. And because firefighters in general are welcomed with open arms by the public, it's a continued missed opportunity that we are not pushing on those open doors and building on all the fantastic work that was undertaken during the pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. Go back to the statistic that when someone in the UK is having a cardiac arrest, in 97% of the time, a firefighter can get there before an ambulance can get there, and yet we don't explore that, and it's not been adopted as a national priority. Anyway,
well, just on that, and I know you want to move on. I was listening to the radio. I think it was yesterday. And some stats have recently come out in terms of the response standards from the NHS nationally. And from memory, but don't quote me, the response time is currently something like 35 minutes to a cardiac arrest, when the target should be 18.
Right.
It's an unbelievable positive story that the fire service could fill if it was to be proactive in terms of, filling that void. I know corresponding schemes are happening in other services, and we've supported them over decades, but we're just not doing enough. And I won't talk about broadening of the role anymore.
No, but going back to the on-call, having corresponding at stations help stations to be busy, productive, and that's why people join. People want to be active and achieve something as an on-call firefighter, and it's an amazing role that it could be playing within their community and rural communities.
Certainly is. But back to culture.
Yes, so things have been happening in the House of Commons.
So yes, periodically there's a committee called the Home Affairs Committee that obviously deals with home affairs, and from time to time, certain leaders and organisations are called before the committee to talk about a particular subject. Fire has been called before the committee previously, a couple of years ago. The Inspectorate and the NFCC and the FBU as well were called before the committee, and that recently took place again in March last month. Again, we had representatives from the Inspectorate. Nazir Afzal, who undertook an independent inspection of London Fire, was called before. FBU were there. FRSA were there, women in the fire service were there, some chiefs as well were there, and a fire authority chair. So we have these committees, and at the end of it, there will be a report published about the content and the view and the recommendations, etc. But ultimately, these reports are normally forgotten and shelved. But what is important is the ability to listen to what stakeholders have got to say on particular subjects, because it provides an insight as to how they think, how they plan to move forward on certain things. And again, within the show notes, we'll put links to both of the sessions that took place in March. But I have to say, some of the comments that were made by those invited to give evidence was absolutely astonishing. And I would recommend anyone who's serving or recently served in the fire service to watch the sessions in their entirety, because they will be absolutely aghast as to some of the things that were said. I'm deliberately not going to name names, because I would suggest people view the video. But when you've got chiefs coming before MPs and saying that the organisation of which they are ultimately responsible for, that they are the head of, is institutionally racist and misogynist, then the implications of making that comment, that is a public comment, that is there on record forever and eternity, the implications of that are significant. And I was hoping that we could talk about that.
Let's talk about that.
So it seems to me to be quite fashionable to say that the organisation you work for is institutionally racist and or misogynist. But I can only speak as I find. I don't believe that to be true of any service, excluding London, that we haven't had a huge involvement in our history. I just don't see the evidences out there that confirms that. And I think I'm just going to put on the screen a definition of institutional racism. It's a definition. There will be other definitions out there, but I think broadly this is widely accepted as being correct. And the definition is that institutional racism, also known as systemic racism, is defined as policies and practices that exist throughout a whole society or organisation that result in and support a continued unfair advantage to some people and unfair or harmful treatment of others based on their race or ethnic group. Now, I'd welcome your views on this, Ben, but I don't believe there's a fire service out there that specifically has a structure and policies and procedures that are racist. I just don't see that.
That's not to say that we don't recognise that there are undoubtedly behaviours and mindsets that would express racist and misogynistic views.
What 100%. We know that there is a culture problem out there.
Yeah, but that's different to the technical definition of what institutional racism or misogyny is.
And that is so important to make that that clarification.
Yeah.
That's not saying everything in the garden's rosy, because
Absolutely
your organisation is not institutionally racist or misogynist.
No.
But that is the far end. That is the extreme of the behaviours that we're witnessing. They're abhorrent, that the behaviours, because we deal with this. We case manage member cases,
Absolutely.
so we know what's going on in services. But that is very different to saying it's institutionally racist and misogynist. So, what are the implications of that? Well, look at the Met Police. They were labelled with that, rightly or wrongly, and the question is, how do you remove that stigma? Because once you've got that label, it is extremely hard to remove. It has implications for the people within the organisation.
Yes.
And just as important, it has implications for people who might have wanted to join that particular fire service.
Absolutely.
If you are female,
Yeah.
if you are from a minority background, are you now going to think twice about joining that particular fire service?
No. It compounds the problem, doesn't it?
Absolutely does.
I do think the fire service faces a question about how wide-reaching its recruitment strategies and opportunities are, for sure, to ensure that those underrepresented groups are, made aware of recruitment opportunities and support. I think that's an important question. I still, like yourself, I'm not sure that meets the criteria of institution, a process and a system. But as you say, to go out and say that undoubtedly compounds the problem. And for me as well, I think for a chief fire officer, chief executive to go out and say that their organisation is institutionally racist or misogynistic demonstrates that they have failed in their duty of care to align themselves to the Equality Act, Section 149, doesn't it?
So you quite correctly raised this, and you're a lot more conversant of the public sector equality duty than I am. So I don't know whether you, for the listeners rather than the viewers, if you want to read out that particular section.
Definitely. So, Public Sector Equality Act, the Equality Act 2010 has a specific section about, which is Section 149, about the public sector equalities duties. And those two duties can be summarised within 2 points, which is the requirement to publish equality information at least once a year to show how they've complied with the equality duty, and also to prepare and publish equality objectives at least every 4 years. So to come out and say that their organisation is institutionally racist and misogynistic I would think suggest that they haven't achieved, fulfilled that duty of care, unless they then go on to qualify that statement and say, despite a whole raft of innovations and initiatives and education pieces, and I don't think that was the gist of what was said in Westminster, was it?
No, not at all. And obviously, if a statement like that comes out, there needs to now be a plan put in place to overcome an organisation being institutionally racist and misogynistic.
Absolutely.
And that's something, something we will be following up because, just like every fire service up and down the country, we've got members within that organisation who quite rightly are contacting us and saying, well, what does that mean for me?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because once you're labelled with that, your friends, your family, your colleagues are then going to be looking at you as a representative of that organisation that has that stigma.
And I would imagine that had that label been applied by something like the Inspectorate, that would then require an urgent improvement plan, wouldn't it?
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt.
If a chief executive labels themselves as that, then surely they would also want to impose a clear improvement plan and how they were going to go about achieving it.
Well, go back to South Wales. Hugh Jakeway, I don't think he would have retired had that report not come out that made that claim. And you're absolutely right that the individual as the head of that organisation then needs to reflect on the implications of what they've said.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I think is really important is that how many fire services out there are institutionally racist and misogynist? Because I don't know why it took being put in front of the Home Affairs Committee before you made that admission.
Mm-hmm.
So the question has to be asked. Maybe it has been. Maybe it's been asked within NFCC. I don't know. But the question should be asked, certainly by fire authorities or whatever governance model they've got. Do you believe, and do we have the evidence to sustain the fact that our organisation is racist and misogynist?
Mm-hmm.
As I said, right at the very outset, it seems fashionable to make these big claims without a full understanding of the implications.
And I still think it's interesting to see talk about the direct entry schemes into fire services, so that people with different life experience, different backgrounds should have the opportunity to enter into higher levels of management within the fire sector, and hopefully break down some of those networks and those firewalls.
Yeah, I think in terms of direct entry, I mean, we've been a supporter of direct entry for a number of years. I know not all trade unions are, but we do see the benefits if it's managed correctly to have a blended approach, particularly within. I know there are some concerns from sections that say you need to have had that operational experience to be able to perform senior managerial levels. I don't agree with that. I think again it goes back to the blend. If you had a level of management that had no operational experience at all, then that would be of a significant concern. But it's all about a blended approach. Um, Running a large organisation with 500 or 1,000 or 1,500 employees
Yeah,
is no different to whether that's a private company or whether that's a fire and rescue service to a degree,
absolutely.
particularly with regards to financial management.
Yeah,
And having a situation where the chief will have been or will had to have been a firefighter at some stage to be able to run an organisation that has an operational budget of tens of millions seems it seems weird to me. It seems perverse. You don't need to have had to have been a firefighter
no,
to run an organisation. I don't think.
no, and I agree. I think what we're seeing through these headlines and reports is the need to break down the groupthink that exists within our fire and rescue sector, and for people to come in and challenge viewpoints, challenge the status quo, and to bring in that, and apart from anything, bring in some diversity.
And the way to it's going to how you like to think it's going to happen when you have recruits come in with the correct vetting procedures, etc. Um, but having direct entry means it's going to happen quicker,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
which I only think is a good thing. And I think there is some pushback from certain areas purely because they will be seen to be inferior. The current management will be seen to be inferior when they're able to compare with people coming in from outside of the fire and rescue service. There is that fear. We've got a situation at the moment in most services where people are getting promoted because they say the right things. They're yes people, and there's an element of groupthink.
Mm-hmm.
You need that diversity of thought. You need to have that constructive challenge, so that whatever direction you're going in, you're making sure on a regular basis that the direction you're going is the right one. Because sometimes it was, but you need to step back.
Mm-hmm.
Situations outside can mean that what was the correct direction suddenly isn't the correct direction. But fire services have a habit of ploughing ahead no matter what.
Yeah.
And yeah, having that diversity of thought coming in with a blended approach, I think is the right one.
Is there anything else that's been going on over the last couple of months since our last pod?
Well, I think the previous couple of pods we were talking about Warwickshire.
Yes.
So I think probably just an update on the Warwickshire situation and for background. In Warwickshire, the chief there, Ben Brooke, took the view that the on-call duty system was not fit for purpose, would never be fit for purpose, and was going to be basically done away with an alternative idea of using more whole-time, part-time contracts and something called surge teams. So that consultation process concluded, I think it was on the 10th of March or thereabouts. We've submitted our detailed response.
Yes.
We've also submitted a joint response with FOA, Fire Officers Association,
Good.
which I think is good on a number of fronts. It strengthens the argument. It demonstrates that unions within the fire service can work together. And it also demonstrates the strength of feeling that is against the proposals.
Good.
In terms of the FBU, we're trying to find out whether one, they've actually submitted a response, because if they haven't, by default that means that they are supporting the proposals. But if they have submitted a response, we're trying to see whether we can get a hold of a copy. We've made ours public, as we think is the right thing to do. But it would be interesting to know what their view was in that.
Well, I think that's been a really interesting update. Some really interesting conversations there, and definitely some talking points going forward. Is there anything else you want to touch on?
No, I think there's going to be the fire service arena is very, very busy at the moment. There are lots of things happening. So I think we'll probably have a few more topics of conversation to come up in our future episodes of the second series of Priority Message.
Brilliant. Well, thanks very much for your time today, Tristan. It's been fascinating.
Pleasure. Always a pleasure, and look forward to the next one. And thanks for everyone out there listening. Subscribe to the podcast, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and share the information with your friends and colleagues.